Introduce the history of how this strange collection came about, and just to tell you about how they're laid out so that you can study it later. And then I just thought I'd briefly discuss a few hundred examples before I let you go. So, the history of the collection. Well, it all as Hilary mentioned earlier, it all goes back to 1984 and the miners' strike, which is really a major political event. A major event in political history in the 20th century, and it affected the whole country, and obviously all the mines in all the northern parts of the country, plus some in the south as well. One in Kent was still functioning at that time, and miners' support groups were set up across the country, and the National Union of Miners decided to twin miners' support groups in the cities with individual pits. I was very active in Labour Party politics in the 80s and early 90s, and so I went along and joined up with the Cambridge Miners Support Group, and we were twinned with the villages of Rainworth and Blidworth, pronounced in knots as Blidworth, which are two pits, where there was divided loyalties between the NUM and the other union, the Scab union, but obviously we were supporting the NUM. Of course, the main job of the support group was to raise funds, to buy food, and to take it up to the pit villages to be distributed there. They set up community kitchens in the social clubs if the NUM would let them in, if the coal board didn't manage to exclude them, or in their own homes. And then one initiative we had in Cambridge after a few months was to invite miners' families to come down to Cambridge for a few days or a week to have a holiday from the grind of the strike and the picket lines and the community kitchens and so on. So that's how I got to know some miners and their families. And when they came with them, there's an interesting culture clash, which I won't dwell on, between the Cambridge and the men and women and their families from Nottinghamshire. But we got to know them, and then they brought all their paraphernalia of the strike. They had badges, they had mugs, they were very generous with them. So, and I'd like to draw attention to this mug in the third row down, this large mug, second from the left. That badge, which I think everyone can see a red badge, obviously you can't read it, NUM strike, Nottingham, 1984 to 1985. In fact, you'll see that badge on several of the mugs in the collection. But what's unique about that mug, well, apart from its size, it's a tankard really rather than a mug, is it's got Blidworth written on it, the name of the mine, the pit that we were twinned with. And that was really a limited edition mug that was given to all the miners who stayed loyal to the union throughout the 1 year length of the strike. So I feel very privileged to own a copy of that. What was I talking about? Oh yes, so that was the beginning of the collection, and they gave me various other mugs, and then I got some Labour Party mugs, and I got mugs from various progressive causes, and before long my mantelpiece was full and I had to make some shelves. So I'd gone from just having a few mugs on the shelf to having a collection. And it grew quite rapidly during the remainder of the 80s until about 1992. 88 to 92 I was a city councillor. 92 my constituents disposed of my services, which created more time in my life. So what would I do with it but collect mugs? So I moved on from the origins into the sort of mania. I mean, collecting is an addiction really, so once you're hooked, then you go mad. And so I was writing to trade unions across the country, I was visiting charity shops which sometimes have second-hand mugs that people have brought in, or their own campaigning mugs, going to rallies and so on. So the collection grew rapidly until 1999. There was about 400 mugs. Pretty much every wall of my house was covered with mugs, mug shelves and mugs. And then what happened? Then I met Trisha. And we decided we'd move in together. And we decided that the house was getting a bit small, it needed extending, it needed renovating. So to protect them, all the mugs went in the attic in 1999. I know it's 1999 because they're all wrapped up in 1999 newspapers, which delayed my unwrapping, I might say, reading all the old newspapers. Yes, there they stayed for 18 years until I got them out for this exhibition. But the manic phase of collecting was over. But of course, as you know, once a mugaholic, always a mugaholic. So at any time I'm walking down the street, if I see a second-hand shop or a charity shop or something that looks like it, I can sort of sniff out a radical mug. They have to be radical, by which I mean sort of generally left-wing, progressive, supporting campaigns for less advantaged people. So yes, the collection has continued to grow. There's always a sort of recent acquisition section on one of the shelves in the house. So that's the history of the collection. The layout of the exhibition, I should say there's these three sections of the cabinet, and there's also two cabinets at the back. There's a catalogue which gives a description of all the mugs in this section. That's about 142 mugs, I believe. And then at the back, there's more collections from the. These are all mostly UK-based mugs. There's international mugs from Americas, Africa, anti-apartheid, China, Vietnam. So the international section is at the back, and these are more the UK-based ones, with some of the international ones down here. And these are all in the catalogue and are described, and the other ones we didn't have time for, or space. So just coming through on this one, this section of the cupboard, of the cabinet, it is really themes that sort of run across the collection, so they're picked out from different subject areas. And this one I call Mugology, so it tells you a little bit about different kinds of mugs you can get. And so they come in very different sizes, as you can see, from this tall glass, and different materials as well. So we've got a tall glass tankard, we've got a couple of ceramic mugs, a Chinese one with Mao Zedong on it and his friend, and it's got a lid on. You might notice Chinese seem to like to have a lid on their mugs, so they always have a lid. A little tin mug, an enamel mug from Robben Island, where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned. And then a two-hand, I don't know if everyone can see it, but along there's a double-handled miniature mug from the Knots NUM again. Here there's a few mugs that sort of are about mugs. So there's a spitting image, official Don't Talk to Me About Politics mug. One for the kids maybe, why should I wash my mug when all the world's such a mess? There's the left-handers mug. I don't know if that's really a radical cause, but some left-handers are very offended that if they pick up the mug, the message is on the far side and they can't read it. So that's a campaign. It's left-wing, sort of, isn't it? Less humorous, this mug shows you it can be dangerous to own a mug. It tells the story of Matthews Nchiwa, who was a factory worker in South Africa, and he was drinking out of a mug which said release Nelson Mandela, for which he was prosecuted and imprisoned for 18 months. So expressing your opinions is something we can do in this country, but in other parts of the world it can be dangerous. So the next cross-category is mugs with a Cambridge connection. I mentioned the NUM mug with the twinned with Blydydd. As Nelson Mandela, what's he doing in the Cambridge connection? He's an honorary fellow of Magdalen College. Well, myself and at least one attendee here were students. We've got the Cambridge CND, a couple of Cambridge rag mugs, again not radical but certainly Cambridge. The next three is mugs from the baby milk campaign. This was when Nescafé were promoting, and other manufacturers were promoting baby milk powder in Africa. Firstly, almost getting the families hooked on it if the mothers couldn't give milk anymore because they were using cheap baby milk powder, then they had to buy it and it was expensive, and they were using water that wasn't pure, so it was actually a very dangerous thing. So it was a strong campaign, and the Cambridge connection is that campaign was based in St Andrews Street in Cambridge. And the next category is I sort of manufactured. It's called Heroes and Villains. up here, the first three we've got is Karl Marx. Oh, you can decide for yourself who's a hero and who's a villain. So I've only got one liberal in the whole collection, which is Lloyd George. So I thought I'd teach him a lesson and squeeze him in between Karl Marx and Ho Chi Minh. But in fact, I think he is a hero. I mean, apart from minor achievements like winning the First World War and many major pieces of important reform legislation, his main achievement, as far as I'm concerned, is he split the Liberal Party and kept it out of government for nearly 100 years. Also, we've got Che Guevara, inevitably. Cheers, Mr. Gorbachev. Thank you very much for promoting the end, or initiating the end of the Soviet Union. And to bring the collection up to date, I bought a Donald Trump mug. It's there to answer it features Donald J. Trump and Jesus H. Christ. And it's attempting to answer the question is would Jesus turn the other cheek? And if you have a look at it later, you can see the answer. This is a collection of literary connections and newspapers. The Big Issue. We've got quotes from George Orwell and from the Ragged Trousered Philanthropist, a socialist classic, and the Guardian mug and so on. So anyway, these are the cross-collection ones. This is all basically Labour movement, Labour Party, trade unions, miners' dispute, which we already talked about, and other trade union disputes. Including here, so I'm talking about the third shelf down. The mug on the left celebrates the Tolpuddle Martyrs, who were a group of agricultural workers in 1830 who tried to form a union. This upset the local gentry. You know, they didn't want to pay even very, very sub-minimal wages, and so they managed to get them prosecuted on the charge of swearing an illegal oath to form a union. And they were sentenced to 6 years transportation to Australia, which even then it was a major political campaign in Parliament, which in fact they were returned early after 2 years and released. So that's in some ways the beginning of the trade union movement. And the next one is also celebrating a historic event. It's closer to home this time. This is the Burston Strike School. Burston is a village in Norfolk, so only about an hour from Cambridge, where the teachers in the school, a husband and wife couple, again upset the local gentry, who got them fired as teachers, which upset the pupils and parents. So they set up their own strike school, first on the village green, and then in a carpenter's house, and then in a special building which they built with contributions from various sources. And that it started in 1914, and the strike school continued to teach children in the same building until 1939, so it was a 25-year-long strike, which is the longest strike in history. Other famous strikes is the Wapping strike, another all about the Murdoch press and the move to Wapping. And other strikes, NES strikes, ambulance driver strikes. Another very famous and long strike was the GCHQ strike. And finally we've got the mysterious Portsmouth lockout of '96. I think this could be the sole evidence that such a thing ever happened. I've got the mug, but Google doesn't know about it. So anyone familiar with the Portsmouth lockout, please send further information. And then other trade union mugs. Usually either with their campaigns such as Musicians Union, Keep Music Live, or Axe the Poll Tax, the anti-poll tax trade unions, or historical ones commemorating jubilees and so on. This mug here is from Usdaw, and it's celebrating an anniversary of a campaign in 1910. The campaign, it shows a whole load of top-hatted gentlemen, sandwich board men, parading in Oxford Street, and they were campaigning against the living-in system, which the shop owners to force their employees to live in the premises and to buy their goods in the premises. So they virtually became a slave. You know, they spent all their money. And that was a successful campaign. And down here we have Labour Party mugs, of Labour movement. That is the oldest mug in the collection. Most of them are more recent than 1984, but some of them go back. On the second shelf from the bottom, second mug in, is a mug from 1912, celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Barnsley Cooperative Society. And then, so the third category at the front here is organisations supporting progressive causes. I'll move over here. This is the gender politics one. I don't think we generally think of Charlotte Bronte as a radical, but a quote from her book, "I'm independent, sir, as well as rich. I am my own mistress," which I think is a nice statement. Some of them are less. Well, there's the famous Rosie the Riveter, for women working, I think, in American shipyards, and again featured on the poster there that you've probably seen before. A lot of humour in these. This mug over here, I'll read it out. "This mug contains scalding hot coffee. If you make a sexist remark to me, I will pour it on your crutch. Have a nice day." And this, here we've got the Lesbian and Gay Pride from 1995. I noticed some people were noticing this mug here. Again, some people can't see it. Shows a lady with a pearl necklace standing in front of a house which she appears to have just set fire to, and she's saying, "Well, that takes care of the housework." And over here we have a mug I got in Seattle, and it's provided by the Ladies Sewing Circle and Terrorist Society. I hope that was humorous. This is human rights. Now you notice there's one mug missing here. I'm about to do a demonstration of this mug. I feel a bit like Stephen Fry here, don't you, on his QI when he does his little experiments. But this is produced by the Unemployed Philosophers Guild in America, and it's called the Bill of Rights, or rather the Disappearing Civil Liberties mug. So the American Bill of Rights is actually the first 10 amendments to the American Constitution. After they'd written the American Constitution, there was a general feeling that it didn't say enough about protecting individuals from the power of the state. So they came up with a batch of amendments to enshrine civil liberties in the Constitution. So this is the Bill of Rights and 10 amendments, many of them very worthwhile: religious freedom and freedom of speech and not being able to be searched without a warrant, etc., etc. Others might be more controversial, like the right to bear arms. But anyway, these unemployed philosophers had nothing better to do than to produce a mug which was got all these civil liberties written on them. So you can imagine them getting their mug out, reading up all their civil liberties, and then they make their tea and pour in the hot water.
I'm holding it near the cup.
Now, I don't know if you can see this, but it's lit from behind, isn't it? There's a spotlight somewhere. It's over here. And you'll see some of the civil liberties are slowly disappearing. It's a heat-sensitive ink. So I don't really know what their political angle is, if any, these unemployed philosophers. No, I don't suppose they've got one, have they, being philosophers? Anyway, am I making assumptions here? They're philosophical, aren't they? So that was in the human rights section. This is from this mug here, the second one in, is from Amnesty. You probably heard the famous quote from Descartes, which is, "I think, therefore I am." And Amnesty's take on that, as an organisation defending victims of justice, of miscarriages of justice, is, "I think, therefore I am in prison." And the fourth, so that's the human rights section. We've got an environment section here. This one's a bit of a 70s throwback. Small is beautiful, intermediate technology. I mean, it's still carrying on today, but it was certainly all the rage in the 70s. Then finally, down in the bottom row, we've got CND and Peace. A mug on the second row up on the left is a 1919, end of the First World War, Peace one. It rather charmingly says on it, presented by the Cramlingham Cooperative Society. Most of the peace mugs are actually really triumphalist victory mugs. We won. This one is not like that. It has a dove in the middle instead of a royal or a triumphal crest. There's Make Love Not War, or the variant Make Tea Not War. There's Picasso's dove, and down here is Picasso's Guernica mug, which we bought in Prado, isn't it? That's right, in Madrid, which is where it still resides, I believe. So that's this selection. I already mentioned the these are fully disappeared now, but I'm not sure of the significance of which of the civil liberties have disappeared and which ones are still there. It's obviously, I presume it's the ones they think are under threat. So, oh, that seems to be more than 15 minutes. So I think I'll shut up there and thank you all very much. And I also thank I just wanted to thank the museum for giving me the opportunity to get these mugs out of the attic after 18 years. To thank Hilary, who's been the main organiser, but in fact it arose from a conversation with Shelley and Trisha. Shelley talking about the community cabinet and Trisha mentioning this hoard of mugs in our attic was the germ of the idea. And to thank everyone who's come along and come back, bring your friends.
Put something on TripAdvisor.